2016 was a big year for superhero films, but it was also a bit of a mixed bag. There were hits like Civil War and Deadpool, but also some missteps like, well, DC. I guess those films at least had some level of enjoyment, which is more than can be said for X-Men Apocalypse. That was a film which, unlike the others, I never really had high expectations going into, yet somehow, looking back, it's still my most disappointing film of the year. That got me thinking what actually was wrong with it, so I sat down to rewatch it with a notepad and pen, writing down every issue I found, resulting in 7 pages that translated to over 2,500 words of notes. That should show you how much I don't like this film, and that I really need a hobby. But yeah, I've produced this video explaining everything that I think is wrong with X-Men Apocalypse. So, I'm the chosen one here, and if you actually like the film, let's see if I can convert you. Let's begin. To start things off, I posed a rather important question: do you really care much about the X-Men? They've had some bad films, some rather good films, but I've never really cared about the universe like I do with the MCU. There's all the changing of actors, and so many random background X-Men throughout the 6 movies. Like this person. What did this person do again? Who even is this person? It means I find it hard to attach myself to and care for the characters, like you would Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, or Chris Evans as Captain America. And without that relation, I think the films have less impact. Please go back to Marvel. It worked for Spider-Man. We keep getting more and more X-Men films about human-mutant conflict, and I get that's important to the franchise, but we've seen it for 6 movies now. I'm hoping the next film will move away from this concept for once. Let's move on to a big part of the film, the ancient bad boy himself, Apocalypse. I'm not a big fan of his design. He kind of looks like a Doctor Who alien, to be honest. Worse though, it's a race of Oscar Isaac. Great actor, but with all the makeup on him and voice modulation, really it could be anyone under there. Also, what are his powers? Bar the mind stuff. Sand powers? Evil sand powers?
I don't like sand.
Overpowered evil sand powers. He rolls his eyes and everyone dies instantly. Why didn't he just use this on the X-Men? He also creates huge, swirling tornadoes of death. Makes you wonder what he needs the others for. The best bit though is how his vague sand powers create a temple. Not a hastily made temple from the ruins of other buildings, which would be kind of eerie and cool, but a fully detailed piece of architecture. He even had time to create statues of all of them. And the matching costumes. Apocalypse is all about squad goals apparently. Speaking of the squad, no, not that squad, how does the mind control work? Psylocke tried to fight him, and Storm loves Mystique, so they have no reason to join him, so it appears to be full-on mind control. But then Apocalypse has to persuade Magneto to join them. In this scene, Magneto doesn't seem to be under the mind control yet. Later it's mentioned that he is, but he's still sort of doing his own thing of his own will, I think? It's very vague. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did it a lot better with Hive. Maybe because Hive doesn't look like a shriveled up smurf. He also amplifies their powers, but not very well as his powerful horsemen get destroyed by some untrained kids. Good job. We first see the Horsemen of the Apocalypse with the original ones in the opening scene, and I have to admit, they look very cool. The problem is, they look a lot cooler than the ones we actually get. Apocalypse is meant to be picking the strongest mutants around, right? That's why he goes to Caliban, who, by the way, isn't as awesome when not played by Stephen Merchant. In reality though, he picks the first random mutant he stumbles upon, the second random mutant he stumbles upon, and a drunken cage fighter. Where have we seen that before? Random thing I noticed, Psylocke is basically evil Wonder Woman. Sword? Check. Whip? Check. Completely impractical armour? Mega check. Most confusing is the end, when they all sort of break free from Apocalypse's powers. Well, Magneto definitely does, Angel blows up, and the others sort of disappear for a bit. I don't know where. Lunch break or something. Then there's Magneto. Ah, Magneto. The dark and tortured supervillain living on a magical woodland farm with animals and a happy family, like somebody from a Disney cartoon. I can understand him wanting a break from the fighting, but this seems a little too much, and I don't think it fits what we've seen of the character. It's also rather obvious that the family are going to die. A death that should be tragic, except for how it happens. They don't shoot the kid trying to stop her, or even trying to hit Magneto, which would have been impactful. No, a guy turns to look at a bird and then accidentally fires at them. That's what the big tragedy of this film is based upon. A guy casually turning to look at a bird and then accidentally shooting a kid. We've kind of seen this before anyway. He loses his family again, then goes evil and wants revenge, again. I love Michael Fassbender as young Magneto and all, but I don't like how they keep fluctuating him like, he's good, oh no he's evil. He saved the orphanage, oh wait now he's burning it down. Magneto in the original films wasn't good or bad. He was somewhere in the middle, and that's what made him a compelling villain. At least he still has one child alive with Quicksilver, not that Magneto finds out. They sort of set up for Quicksilver pulling a Luke Skywalker and redeeming Magneto. But Quicksilver decides not to tell him for no real reason, meaning it has no effect at all on the movie. And Magneto's good again at the end, of course. He destroyed half the world, at least partially due to his own will, and gets off with no consequences whatsoever. Take it away, Rocket.
Everybody's got dead people. It's no excuse to get everybody else dead along the way.
I also don't get why the film still dwell on an Eric Xavier dynamic. It is a nice dynamic, but we've seen so many films of it, as if they, and Wolverine, who's now gone, are the only characters that matter. You can't bring in these new mutants and expect us to care about them when at its core, the film is still about the world's most complicated romance. So yeah, the new X-Men team. I'm not a big fan of Sophie Turner. From what I've seen of her in Game of Thrones and this, I don't think she's a particularly great actress. And her American accent is questionable at best. The costumes at the end are sort of forced in as well, like, oh look, we happen to have perfectly fitting flight suits for everyone. I mean, they could have at least made them the classic yellow, like in First Class. Wolverine was good to see, but reminded me of how much better Logan was. They did actually set up Logan in the end credit scene with Weapon X, but it would have been much cooler if anyone actually knew what that was, without having to Google it. The Quicksilver speed scene is very fun, I'll admit, but I also think it's much more flawed than the original. For a start, it's kind of forced in there. The first one occurred naturally as the team brought him along to help, but he just happens to stumble upon this one. Though I'll admit that with how often the X-Mansion explodes, that wouldn't be too hard to stumble upon.
Please, how's blowing up Bill's character?
His speed is kind of inconsistent too. Some people he has to take time slingshotting out of the house, but with others he can go fast enough to take them all out individually. Regardless, it's insanely overpowered. The explosion's a few seconds long at max, and he evacuates the entire house, minus Havoc, sorry mate, you've been replaced, whilst having time to mess around still. That's insane. He can basically do anything at that speed, nothing's a threat to him. He could just run to Egypt, slap Apocalypse and the Horsemen to death before they even notice what's happening, and then run back home in under 10 minutes. Instead, he's noticeably a lot slower in the rest of the movie, because he runs at the speed of plot. Ultimately though, my biggest problem with the New Mutants is that we don't get to know them enough to care. Time to tackle the big bit, the final fight. Spoiler alert, I didn't like it that much. I know, major plot twists, weren't expecting that, but I think it's really just missed potential. I genuinely do like that bit where Apocalypse adapts to Quicksilver's speed and manages to stop him. That's cool. It could have made for a cool fight as he takes on the mutants, learning to counter their powers. But instead, it quickly turns into a CGI laser fest of metal, storm, beams and fire. And Dark Phoenix. That went well for them last time. I'm not against them tackling it again, but it's too soon in the character. I also quite like the idea of Xavier fighting Apocalypse in the War of the Minds, but it does raise some plot-breaking questions. It seems that in the mental battle, Apocalypse is much stronger, as Professor X gets, well, wrecked. But it's repeatedly said that Professor X has the best mind powers, as Apocalypse tries to hack into them, and even wants Xavier's body for them. Who has better mind powers? Whoever the plot wants it to, it seems. And we get more pointless destruction. It's something superhero films have been criticised a lot for recently, and have reacted to it well by dealing with the consequences, as seen in Batman v Superman and Civil War. It's ironic then that the X-Men series, the one that has always been about the consequences of having powers, decides to throw apocalypse-level destruction into the script like it means nothing. We don't even really see humans getting hurt by it, with the exception of the most boring Stan Lee cameo, where he literally just stands there. Nearly done now, I just have two final points that didn't really fit anywhere else in the script. Firstly, Moira. I don't get her role in this movie. She was there at the start to kick off the plot in the temple, where she became Indiana Jones for some reason, but other than that, she spends the whole movie in the background, just sort of being there. And then Mystique is leading the new X-Men. Mystique, the cool bad guy from the original films, who has been forced as a sort of hero in this new trilogy. I don't really like Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. particularly how she spends 95% of the movie just being Jennifer Lawrence. How long is she blue for, like 1 minute max? So much for the big deal of Mutant and Proud from the first film. The real reason for this is Fox saving money on the makeup budget, and using Jennifer Lawrence's appeal as a famous movie star to bring more people into the film. It just seems like a waste of a cool villain to me. So, those are more or less my issues with the movie. Please leave a comment if you agree or disagree with any of my points. I'm always open to new opinions. And if you enjoyed the video, there's a little like button somewhere down here. And a dislike one, but we don't talk about that one. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for something Star Wars, Nintendo, Marvel, who knows? I probably should, but I don't.